Good afternoon, everyone, and I would like to welcome you and call to order our Middlesex County Council meeting for Tuesday, April the 13th. Since our last council meeting, there have been many changes. We have gone from being in a designated red zone to the province declaring a new restriction level by pulling an emergency brake to now living under a provincial stay-at-home order. The last couple of weeks remind me of the early days when changes to restrictions seemed to happen every day and things changed very quickly. I don't know about you, but yesterday's announcement, keeping schools closed and offering online learning after the April break, really deflated me. I'm well beyond having kiddies in school, but keeping children home really sets the tone of how things may or may not be reopened when the stay-at-home order is lifted. I felt yesterday that the finish line became further out of reach. We do have to acknowledge, though, the positives that we are experiencing. Vaccine availability has been expanded in the county to pharmacies in our communities. That does come with a caveat, however, as we need to understand that the rollout and logistics may take some work and time. And I ask our residents to be patient. We are all advocating for our communities, but the announcement on the weekend was promising. It does seem like everything these days is an effort. As leaders, we are looked to for inspiration and a steadfast approach to keep going. But this can be hard. To always have a stiff upper lip, to always be pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps can be difficult. And it does take an emotional toll. I will be honest with you. There are mornings that I wake up and all I want to do is pull the blanket over my head and hope to wake up to different challenges. This morning, the Women's Caucus met in preparation for the event that we are hosting tomorrow evening. Councillor Warwick shared with us words that she opened her council meeting with yesterday. Now, she borrowed them from Dr. Alex Summers from the health unit. And I think we all agreed it was an important reminder for all of us personally and to share with our colleagues and residents. It is important to know and realize that we are in the home stretch, and we know that the home stretch is the hardest part of the race. I couldn't agree more with this. Things this week seem incredibly daunting and overwhelming, but that finish line is there, as hard as it seems some days. I know we will make it. Your leadership is important to your communities. You have the honor of looking out for your communities, but you have to remember that all of this can weigh on you. You have to remember to look after yourself. To be an effective leader, you have to stay strong. And my friends, I know that you all have it in you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you've got the minutes. Do we have any business arising from the minutes? You've got the minutes from our March 23rd meeting, and unless there's nothing to be changed or amended, I would look for a mover and a seconder to approve those as presented. Councillor Mayhew and Councillor Richards. All opposed. Those are carried. We do have today 2 deputations, and I am pleased to be able to welcome from the London Community Foundation, Martha Powell, who is the President and CEO. At this time, Martha, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and I turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us. And I want to introduce my colleague, Juliana George, who has worked hard to help me pull this together and supports me in every way. So she's, prepared to take any notes that, if you have questions that we can't answer for you or follow-ups, Juliana's going to help us out. So again, thank you for inviting us to come. Chris, thank you for coordinating this. I've known Chris for a long time. And Kara, thank you for extending this invitation to us. So What we want to do today is really to share with you a little bit about London Community Foundation, what our role is in London, but also in the county. And, you know, we're right up the street from where a lot of you normally are working or would be meeting today. And yet we serve a county that's so large. So next slide then, Chris, thanks. So London Community Foundation, I know there was about, probably, I was trying to think about this the other day, I think it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago was the last time our foundation came to present to the county, and it was around the Glencoe Fair, Farmers Fair. Anyway, it was wonderful to meet some of you then, and some of you perhaps are still there. So London Community Foundation, for those of you who don't know us, we've been around for up to almost 70 years now. Our mission and vision have really not changed. Our foundation is about building an endowment that we can create giving opportunities and granting opportunities to support communities in London and Middlesex County. Our vision is really about working together to make sure that everyone in the community has enriched quality of life. Next slide. Thanks, Chris. So our foundation is, we are a public foundation. We support our city and region, and we used to support London and Middlesex County, but also Elgin and Oxford. And we, about 15 years ago, we changed to supporting London and Middlesex County because other foundations were starting in those regions, and we felt we couldn't serve those regions as best we can. And which is one of the reasons why we're here today to talk to you, because we want to really see how we can serve Middlesex County better. The community foundation movement is huge. As you can see, there's 100 or 1,900 community foundations worldwide. That grows all the time, and there are community foundations in places that you would not think that there would be. Third world countries, developing nations, really all over the place. The US has the most. I think there's over 600 in the US. But in Canada, we have 191 stretched across the country. We have not been able to place community foundations in some of the northern regions, which we're still working to do a better job of. But the movement is quite big. And as you can see, $8 billion in assets are invested in endowed funds in Canada. So this generates significant input into granting into the community and through loans, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Our foundation is the 12th largest. You wouldn't think so because we're up against Vancouver and Victoria and Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton. They're all quite significantly larger than we are, but we're in the pack. Kind of at the lower end of the pack, but we are there. We have just finished closing up our year. Last year, we closed with $108 million in endowed assets, which generates a significant amount of income into the community. We started in 1954, but we were really quite dormant until 1970, in the 70s when J.L. and Taylor, our founder, retired, and he really got us activated again. So next slide, please. Oh, wrong way. Good, thank you. We have 3 strategic priorities that are really significant priorities that we have not changed in quite a few years now. Community impact, which really involves our leadership work. Probably most of you are familiar with what we were attempting to do at the Thames, at the Forks. I know, Bill, we had several conversations about that, but we really believe that leadership is what is going to grow a community and grow our region. And so that's a really strong mandate for the foundation. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about our affordable housing that we've been investing in, but our granting is significant. We put last year over $4 million out into the community. And when I say community, I do mean in the county as well. And there's a couple of areas I'll highlight. One thing that we do that is very important, and I know I've shared copies of our vital signs report with many of you over the years. It's a report on the health and well-being of our community. This year's report just came out not too long ago, but one thing that we struggled with, and this would be a question that we could work with you on, is getting more data from the county that we could report on. We use secondary data. We access university, the college, health units, in school boards, etc. But we don't have as much data, rich data, that we could report that would help tell the story about what the issues are in the county as well. We have been very responsive to the COVID situation. We have granted significant dollars. We formed a council and put about $1 million of our own money in partnership with 2 other foundations. And then we got a federal grant through Community Foundations of Canada to grant about $1.2 million. So we've been able to put at least $2 million, and we're just going into round 3 with about $400,000 that we're going to put in. Our focus was on response right away, and then recovery and rebuild. And as an organization that works and really has a strong knowledge of community charitable sector, we've seen a lot of charities really floundering and struggling through this pandemic, and of course the clients that they serve. So we've been really trying to get out into the communities and understand what the needs are, and focus our energies on not just the recovery, but not just the response, but the recovery and rebuilding and strengthening what we do. We can't do that, of course, if we don't focus on donor relations and growing our donor base. So we have over 400 funds that families and individuals have set up to endow their capital, that we generate the income into the granting programs through, and I'll show you a model a little bit differently later that explains that more. The final pillar of us is financial model, and this is really around making sure that we are strong, resilient, that we are fiscally responsible. We do our due diligence as far as our investments. We have a strong investment committee that monitors our endowments and all of our investments. We call this organizational excellence because we want to be excellent in all ways. As I mentioned, financially due diligent, low cost, which is something that we're very proud of. You can see a lot of organizations, the charitable sector, that spend a lot of money to raise a lot of money, but we feel that we are really keeping our costs low and affordable and very attractive to donors who want to invest and become philanthropic in the community. It's an attractive way for them to do it, and to do it all so they can grant 360 degrees in their focus. So, instead of, if you just grant to one charity, you've granted to one charity, but through a community foundation, you can grant wherever you'd like, as long as it is a registered charity. Our next slide, please. So our supporters, as I mentioned, are donors, but donors come to us in many, many cases through their advisors. So these are accountants and lawyers and estate planners and investors, and they will often, in dealing with their clients, and clients primarily with high net worth, are able to suggest philanthropic ways to help them financially, but also to help them fill their financial or philanthropic needs. So we really work very closely with our advisor network across London and out into the county. We're making certainly more relationships out there that are helping us, and I'll share one of those with you. Our secondary But equally important, really, because we couldn't do it with the primary, without the primary, are the grant recipients and applicants that we get. A lot from London, obviously, but we haven't seen as many applications as we'd like to see from the county. And that's where, I'm hoping we can work together to build a stronger relationship, that we can understand better what the needs are in your communities, and do better outreach out into the county. And we have community influencers who really are the ambassadors, people who have relationships with us, our fund holders, our professional advisors, that we'll talk about what we can do. And it often it's an untold story. Somebody we've been referred to as the honest broker, or a little gem that people really don't understand. And once people do, it's an aha moment for them, that they realize what a community foundation, the impact it can have in a community and beyond. Next slide, please. So this is just showing you our structure. There at the top, you'll see there are total assets, but these are divided into various categories. And so we've got, on the blue side of the chart, these are the unrestricted dollars that we have. And these are where donors have said, we trust your grants committee, which we have people from the county involved as well. We trust you to make the decisions with the money. So we allocate a large chunk of our unrestricted assets, we call them, to the community fund. And we also have an operating endowment fund that generates the income that helps support our organization, so that that allows us to get more money out the door. The gray side is where donors have said, I want to be more hands-on. I want to have control of where my grants go, whether you help me or I have my own ideas, or I've designated these 8 charities that I want to give to each year, or you bring me ideas through the grants program that we learn of, our knowledge base there. So that's more restricted. And then the managed fund piece there, the blue or purple box, is we manage assets for a few other foundations. So the Stratford Perth Community Foundation, the Oxford Community Foundation, and the Jewish Community Foundation all have their assets with us. They have entrusted us to manage them for them and own them to make their profits better. We have a large asset base, obviously have the ability to have a better fee structure, because we can spread our wealth around through a number of different investment advisors than a smaller community foundation would be able to do. We receive gifts of cash, obviously. Our largest growth probably historically has been through people putting us in their estates. When they make their estate plans, they will make bequests to the foundation through gifts of life insurance or securities. But that it's significantly, that's the major planned gift that a donor, it's the largest gift usually in a donor's lifetime that they would make. And that's seen a lot of our growth. Some community foundations have been very fortunate, particularly in the West, where they've had a large corporate, look at Calgary and the corporate support that they've been able to achieve, which we haven't in London. We've lost a lot of headquartered companies from our region or from our area, but we've never received that big $40 million gift that some other foundations have. So we're still looking, and we'll let you know when we do. Next slide, please. You're probably quite used to this map, so I don't really need to go into it, but I put this in here because I think it's important to see London is a pretty small but centralized area in this region. But this region is quite a large region, and how do we understand the vastness of the urban landscape that we're working in is a challenge to us. So the more you can help us, the more we can reach out and support the different counties or the different areas in the county. Population is, very centralized for London, but it's also a very broad. And I live in Grand Bend, so I'm right up on the tip there. But I see as I drive, the expanse of our catchment that we don't understand as well as we should. And this is where we can hopefully work together to make that easier. Next slide, Chris. So Be the Change. This is really about our vital signs work that we've been doing. And that, as I mentioned, is really a report card on the health and well-being of the region. We can't grant and make efficient and really impactful grants if we don't really know what's going on. Obviously, COVID has been has had a huge impact and change on what we've done, what the impact in the communities have been. Everyone's seeing something different. I'm sure each of you are seeing different things in your communities and different issues that need to be addressed. So we do our vital signs report to help us all understand and share it with decision makers and policy makers so that we can be better informed and make informed decisions as we go forward. Next slide, please. One thing I think that is probably most important for us right now, and this goes back to our first pillar under leadership, is the investments that we have started making in the last probably 6 or 7 years into social investment. So we were challenged by the previous Governor General of Canada, David Johnston, that we should be using our capital in a different way. Instead of just having $108 million sitting and generating income that we're granting, how could we use some of that capital in a different way? And so we made a decision through a challenge that he put out there to all of the community foundations in the country to use your capital for social good. So we have, we're actually the second largest investor as a percentage of our capital in Canada, investing in primarily affordable housing. So you'll see here we have a $20 million fund that is putting out $7 million right now. It is invested. This money is loaned. It has a lower interest rate than a traditional bank or financial institution would be able to provide. But the capital comes back. And so our donors are saying, you're using, not only am I getting to grant out of income that I've earned, but I'm also using my capital with a lot of due diligence put onto it to invest in things like affordable housing, which is across the board, one of the hugest issues our country's facing right now. We have right now 450 units or more than that we've created just in the last several years. And the organizations that you'll see there listed are some of the more recent projects that we've invested in. But the next slide, I think, is going to show you one that is really going to be exciting. So that moves us in. Vision SOHO, I think you might have hopefully read about it in the paper. This is the old Victoria Hospital land. And if you've driven down in through SOHO to see that area recently, there's nothing there except a few heritage buildings that are left that need some work. But we've formed a partnership with these players that you'll see: Indwell, Zarin, Homes Unlimited, Chelsea Green, London Affordable Housing Foundation, and the Italian Seniors Project. We've worked with several of these groups before, but we are going to be building over the next several years 650 plus affordable housing. And affordable housing could mean rent geared to income, mixed use, social housing. Indwell themselves, I don't know if you know Indwell well, but their focus is on people that are dealing with mental health and addictions, with a real wraparound support network around them to keep them housed. We strongly believe, and all of these players that are around the table here believe, that it's fine to put a roof over someone's head, but if you can't keep them there, and they don't feel secure there, it's not working. So we are building this initiative, and this will be unique to Canada if we move it forward, working with the city to have the property zoned appropriately. This is just one of the maps showing what we're going to be doing, but it's going to be spectacular. There's green space, parks. The food bank is offered $1 million that they're going to invest in helping us build programming or space or something that's related to food security. We have private donors that have, up to date, I have about $6 million from private donors that want to invest in this area. The regrowth and opportunity, and economically and just from a pride standpoint for this region is going to be really spectacular. So we're very excited about it. You'll see change happening. There's already, we're partnering with Medallion, not partnering, but we're working with Medallion because they've already started working in the area, so that we can really make sure that it's a cohesive new neighborhood for the London area. We're getting to the end. I'm conscious of time. So the next slide. This is just an example of a family who live out in Middlesex County. They live out in the Ilderton area. Paul Manders has been a long-standing professional advisor, friend to the foundation. He's referred quite a number of donors to us. And when he was doing this, he said, why wouldn't I do this with my family? So you can see his family. And I've known the one in the white skirt was a baby when I first met her. So they've really involved their whole family in their philanthropy. And it's important to the kids now that they're going to carry this legacy on for their parents as it continues. And then the final two slides, just to show you some grants that we've done out into the county. Several years ago, the food bank, and I didn't know there was a food bank in Ailsa Craig, but it burned to the ground. And we had a donor that some of you might know that came forward and helped put money to rebuilding the food bank in Ailsa Craig. The Women's Rural Resource Center, we have been funding for several years out in Strathroy. And through the RBC, this was a federal grant program that we participated with the Community Foundations of Canada that we are a member of through the RBC fund. They contributed quite a significant amount of money across the country, that we were one of the groups that we could distribute these funds out. And then the final slide just shows you the COVID fund that I was mentioning that we've done. The first two bullets I won't get into because we've really covered that. But the amount of money that's gone out into London and the county is quite significant. The final grant, this is just one of the grants to highlight, and I just have learned about this one just recently. It's the Quad County Support Services. So basically, it's through the Quest Community Initiative. Some of you would probably know about it. It's associated with the Thames Valley School Board through Glencoe. It's like a resource center, so it's supporting, helping people become employed, helping people with internet access and retraining and food security and all of the things that a resource center would do. And then my colleague Lori told me that I'm allowed to share with you, but nothing's set in stone yet. But we are participating in, it's called the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. And the federal government has given a significant amount of money across the country into our region. We are participating. We had $7 million in request, which totaled 111 grant applications. We have, with a group out of 13 communities throughout Middlesex County and the region of Southwestern Ontario, we're making recommendation of 28 grants that will, if they're approved by Community Foundations of Canada, will go across the county and out into Southwestern Ontario. So that's us. I think the important thing out of this is, with this last program I was speaking about, I think the importance of us being able to draw into and understand the rural resources that are out there is helping us work more into the county. So I'm open for suggestions. Our grants committee is looking to see how we can better support the county. And, we have a lot of donors from the county, but we don't have as many grants going out as we'd like to. So that's us, and I'm open to questions. I hope I haven't taken too much time.
Well, we certainly appreciate the background, Martha. I think this is, it's great to get the information to us, and then we can, take it into our smaller communities. Certainly, there's lots of organizations out there, and it's just a matter of, putting everybody together. So certainly, this is a great package for us to consider taking back to our communities. Are there any questions or comments from Council? Councillor Vanderheyden.
Yes, thank you through the warden. Thank you, Martha, for that presentation. I know that we've had chats before, but it's really good for us to have a refresher. Some of the questions that you asked, particularly around data, I know we really can't rely on the last census because data is changing daily, and with COVID and all the things that we're going through now, we're really facing extremes that none of us have ever seen before. So thank you for that question for us to get on that, so that you have that information, and we'll do our very best to make sure that you get the stats and the data that you need in order to make decisions that will benefit not only London but also Middlesex County. And I also appreciated that you are aware of the rural small urban piece, because we are not big cities here in the county, but we cover a very large area, which also causes more issues because of the distance that people have to go and the capacity that a smaller community has to build the things that we require for the citizens that we represent. So thank you for pointing that out as well, and I'm glad that awareness is there. The affordable housing piece, I call it attainable housing, doesn't matter what you really call it, because the need is really great. And I hope that we can work together on some projects, and because partnerships is absolutely key. We can't do this on our own, and I appreciate that you understand really well that partnerships are vital. And the SOHO project, you just highlighted how many partners are in that project. Nobody can do it on their own. We just can't do that with taxpayers' money. There's not enough of it. So thank you for pointing that out as well. So really not a question, just thanks.
Well, thank you. And I really look forward to, being able to continue this relationship, and to, if you look at our recent vital signs report that's on our website, you'll see the areas that we're focusing in on. And that's where within your own areas, you might be able to help us source where we could get the information that we can help, report it and get it back into the county in a collective fashion.
Any other questions or comments? Maybe on that note, and I don't mean to put our staff on the spot, but I know that Cindy Howard has done some connecting in the past with your organization, but
Yes.
That might be a follow-up. Cindy and actually Lindsay Brock from Library Services, since they're libraries are actually right in our communities, and seeing the work that is being done by some organizations or the work that needs to be done. So I might, suggest that would be a good follow-up with Lindsay and Cindy to follow up with you to maybe have that discussion as well from a broader county perspective.
Absolutely. And I know Cindy is, quite aware of what we're doing, and she's been helpful. But she's been one person, so the more the merrier.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess and this one, just this presentation, and maybe I'm looking to maybe Kathy for that. If maybe that could be sent out to all of us as individual leaders in our communities, and then we can share it with our own councils, just for information. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions or comments, thank you very much, Martha. Appreciate the presentation, and we look forward to further discussions.
Thank you for having us. Enjoy the rest of your meeting and keep well, keep safe, everybody.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
At this time, I am now. Has John joined us? Do I see him? Is he here?
I just joined.
Oh, there he
here.
is. He's in the bottom corner. Great. So I'm pleased to welcome John Harkins from Select Path to talk about our 2021 benefits renewal. And I guess I will hand it right over to John. Are you okay with that, Jessica? Is there anything that you wanted to introduce with, or?
No, not really. I believe my report is up next, which is really going to cover off what John has to say. Traditionally, this really is an administrative process, but with COVID and everything that's happening, I thought it was a great opportunity for John to come here today to speak to council about what's happening in the benefits world. So over to you, John.
Perfect. Well, I rehearsed my lines, which is flip to the next page. So thanks a lot. I thought it was good that we do this because I think there's a lot of misconception about what's going on out there during COVID, good and bad. It has some impact definitely on benefit programs. And we saw a little bit of in last year's, but this really came full circle this year. And, there were some really positive things that come out of it. There's some trends that we've seen come out of it. It doesn't really stop the need to use these services, just that some of them are limited or a little bit closed at times. So we'll get into on the first slide here, just sort of some of the highlights. And I've kept this at a very high level. So the good news is, amidst all of this healthcare inflation that we read about and hear about all the time, overall, the entire program renewed at a decrease, which is exceptional in this day and age, really fueled by a few things. The dental plan, which is on what we call an ASO or administrative services only, ran well. And we've got some reasons why, obviously, with the availability of services last year. The life insurance and long-term disability are entirely pooled and not really determinant upon the claims within the organization. I mean, if you think of what the premiums are, a couple of death claims would wipe those out pretty quickly. So it's pooled across the entire block of business. And the extended healthcare is what they call experience rated. So it is based on what you pay in premiums relative to what you get back in claims. So the one benefit that had a bit of a jump this year, if we go to the next slide, was the LTD. And the LTD has been a bit of a boondoggle for all of the carriers out there. We're dealing in a very, very low interest rate environment right now. So, the incidence level across the board with all carriers has increased dramatically. A lot of mental and nervous claims over the last year or so. So when we're dealing with low interest rates, the amount of money that an insurance carrier has to set aside to pay a long-term disability claim is substantial. So just give an example of a 45-year-old that's receiving, let's say, $5,000 a month in disability payments. Well, that's $60,000 a year, conceivably under the contract for 20 years. So it's about $1.2 million of liability. So the insurance carrier by law has to set aside a reserve to pay that, perpetuate that claim to be paid out. So the reserve is established. And we like to say that the reserve, I guess for illustration purposes, is kind of like an iceberg. The 10% above the water line is what the member receives each month. And the 90% below is kind of what the insurance carrier set aside to pay that claim out. So, we're quite looking forward to, from our side of things, that when interest rates start to creep up a little bit, that's some good ammunition for us to go back to the insurance carriers and really push them on the amount of money that they need in these reserve calculations. But this isn't anything that's specific to Equitable. We moved to Equitable a couple of years ago, and they've been trying to gradually get the rate out. But when we factor the LTD increase in with the decreases and the stability on the other programs, it resulted in the overall bottom line decrease. So any questions on that before we go to the next slide, which is the exciting stuff? Okay. This really is
Actually, I had a question. You couldn't see my hand, John. Sorry.
Oh.
Through the warden, I have a question on that. You asked about the long-term disability, and you said it had to do with the rates going up, down. Does it have anything to do with the different types of long-term disabilities that are now affecting people?
It's not really the nature of them, because if you think the fastest growing area of disability claims tends to be nervous and mental disorders, which, most disability claims are back within the first 2 years. So there's more of them, but they tend to be short in nature. It's the musculoskeletal ones that are long-term. Even some diagnosis. I mean, the one thing that we'll sort of see is there's some medications that are out now, you know, for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, colitis, those types of things that are keeping people at work that may have been off on disability. So either you pay for a disability claim or you pay for an expensive medication to keep that person working. But there's no real trend specifically on claims. It's just that there's more of them these days. Yep, you can click it. So this is an interesting slide, and this really illustrates, you know, the availability or inavailability of services. So obviously during COVID, you know, if you had a prescription, you know, you were still going to get your prescription, and you'll see there that the actual number of drug claims increased by about 5.3% over last year. A small portion of that had to do with there was about a 3-month window there where the supply chain was worried about running out of medication. So if you take the example of someone who's on a blood pressure medication or a blood thinner or something of that nature, where it's they term a maintenance drug, where they're going to be on it for, you know, conceivably the rest of their lives. You used to be able to get those drugs dispensed in a 90-day supply with one dispensing fee. Well, in order to try and make sure that there was an ample supply out there, the government mandated that you could only get a 30-day supply. So for those members, they would have incurred 3 dispensing fees as opposed to 1 to get the same dosage of medication. But it only adds, the average dispensing fee is only about $10. So it would have added about $20 onto that individual's claim. It's more some of these new medications that we'll get into in a couple of slides that are driving up the cost. But as I said earlier, those are the types of medications that are keeping people at work. You'll see in here the red, you know, take a look at it. We're not going to probably see this again, but, you know, obviously access to paramedical practitioners, chiropractors, massage therapists, physiotherapists, those types of places, getting an eye exam, going to get a new pair of glasses, those types of things are, you know, were impacted by the availability. Hospitalization, elective surgeries and things like that. And then services and supplies is sort of a catch-all. It's diabetic supplies and things like that. You know, it's up, but it's nothing. It's not a major portion of the overall expenditure. It's only about 10%. And if we go to the next slide, this sort of hits home, as I mentioned, on the paramedical practitioners. So you'll see there, the thing we had to keep in mind is that you've got a benefit that's got a cap on it of, say, $500 per practitioner, $400, depending on which group you're in. So the fact that you couldn't access the services for a couple of months, a lot of these places were playing catch up. So the massage therapist would have you come in, but there definitely was some hesitance even when things reopened for people to go back and use them again. The one benefit that we see on here, you'll see down below, psychologist, and I can't think of one of these that I've done in the last probably year that hasn't seen an increase on the psychology benefits. So, you know, psychotherapists, social workers, there's a lot of people out there that are, you know, going through some tough times, you know, during this pandemic that have reached out. So that's a benefit that we've seen a real uptake on. And you'll see in there, though, that the majority of them are down. You know, there might have been a couple of claims for a naturopath. I mean, it looks like it's a huge change, 151%, but we're talking a difference of, you know, $700 on the overall expenditure of over $1 million. So no cause for concern on any of this. You know, we anticipate, and we're already seeing that some of these paramedical practitioners are back, you know, and you know, scheduling folks to come in. You know, that's just sort of a blip that we saw, but that also helps to contain costs. So when we looked at the renewal projections for the upcoming year, you know, we do what we call a COVID normalization, where if there were things that happened that we didn't think were going to happen positively or negatively, we can't raise a rate because of something that's not going to reoccur. On the other hand, we're not going to go back and totally discount a rate in the absence of claims we know are just waiting to happen. So any dental work, let's say, that didn't get done during the shutdown, the dentist will do a really good job of not only making sure that you're caught up, but also doing some of those things that they would deem were necessary that weren't being done during those visits that were missed. And we'll touch on that in a few minutes too. But this is sort of an illustration of what happens in the absence of services, how the utilization on the plan kind of drops off. Any questions on that? So what are the disease states that are really driving the cost? And, you know, you'll see this first classification, rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune diseases. This is really these multi-line drugs that treat plaque psoriasis, as you'll see down below, rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's and colitis. Very, very expensive. There's not really generic versions of them available. And you'll see the cost of those is relatively expensive. Now you get into, the classification number 4 antidepressant agents, yeah, there was over 600 claims, but the average claim was only $30. And for those of you that have heard me before, don't hit the panic button. There's not a huge incidence of depression within the group. These are multi-line drugs for sleep aid, ADHD. There's a lot of drugs that fall into that classification. But other than the big categories up at the top there that are really the cost drivers, it's just general usage, and that's what we see on an established group. The MS drug that's in there is relatively new, so some of these new medications that come in. But if you talk to anybody who's receiving any of these drugs, they'll be the first one to raise their hand and say that they're game changers, or they're able to let people function and work. And like I said, the option is, if you don't, in the absence of these types of medications, you may have a higher incidence level on at least short-term disability and probably even long-term disability. On the next slide here, you'll see what this really is. These are the actual medications by name, and some of you may know some of these medications, some of you may not, but you'll see in there what they're treatable. So these injectable biotech agents, as I mentioned, they're like a living organism. These are relatively new drugs. These are injectable medications that are infused, usually on a 4 to 6 week cycle, and you'll see what the cost of them is. So one injectable shot of Humira is about $4,800. Enbrel, which is treating the same thing but at a lower dosage and a different efficacy level, is about $1,800. So there's quite a range on those, as you'll see. And these are the new types of medications that are coming onto the program. You'll see on there Botox. Don't hit the panic button. Once again, that's not the Botox like we think. It's usually for sciatica or for migraine headaches. I don't think there's an allowance in there for cosmetic Hollywood treatments, but someone usually comes forward and says, "What are we paying for Botox for?" Well, it's not really for what you would think it's for. It's the unglamorous side of Botox. So those are the real drivers. Now, I want to spend a bit of time on this because it's been a really, really interesting year on the dental plan. We had calls from no shortage of clients, questioning. People are saying, well, the members pay part of the plan, and they're concerned why they're paying for dental services when they can't access the dental offices because they're closed. Then we had the dental community decided that in order to try and pass on some of the costs that they were incurring to keep their dentists, their offices clean, they tried to put through PPE charges. So we had some challenges from some of the unions. Usually invariably what happens on this group, if there's some sort of province-wide union agreement, after it's sort of been initiated in the hospitals, we'll kind of get an inkling of it. It'll come through the lodge. There's a small division of nurses there. And the commentary was basically from the insurance community was that this is not an actual dental procedure. It's basically passing on their costs. So none of the insurance companies said they were going to pay for it. So the dentists took that and went back to their offices and said, okay, what are we going to do to make up for this? How are we going to increase some of this, what we perceived as lost revenue? And there's a term out there being used. It's almost like vaccine hesitance. There's a hesitance on a lot of people's parts to not go to the dentist until this is over. So there was a real drop in dental claims. You'll see down there that the basic services were down about 16%, and that's the lion's share. That increase on major services was probably 1 or 2 root canals that were done. And, the orthodontics was never really that high in the first place. Well, what the dentists have done this year is they've come back and they put in a 4.6% increase on the fee guide. So if you had a $100 dental visit in December of 2020, and you came back and one of your family members came in January the 1st and had the same treatment, it's going to cost 4.6% more. So whatever the claims were last year, and they were lower than normal, obviously because of COVID, they're going to be at least 4.6% higher this year based on the fee guide increase. And just to wind back the clock, last year they raised it 2%, and the year before they raised it 4.2%. So to put that into context, the dentists have basically voted themselves an increase in the fees that they're charging of almost 11% over a period of less than 2 years. So to put that into context, there's not many employers out there that are raising wages to this extreme, and that's kind of what the world that we're working in. A couple of the other things that they've done this year too that are interesting is they've come back and said, in the absence of some of these treatments, there's probably more deep tissue scaling that we need to do. So we've seen alerts from some of the carriers, and they're cautioning, and they're keeping a tab on this, that, for a dentist to slip in an extra unit of scaling or an extra x-ray or something like that, it's an innocent little thing, but it's $20 for this and $15 or $20 for that. you know, if you add another $30 or $40 on the average dental visit and multiply it by all the number of people, it's a fairly substantial amount of dollars when you add it up at the end of the year. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. The insurance companies are very on top of this. They're going to be auditing a lot of the dentists this year to make sure that, you know, they're not charging an hour and a half's worth of time during a 1 hour appointment. So you may hear from some of the members, we're hearing this from, you know, some other groups, that they're, you know, they're randomly being audited, just saying, you know, did you go to the dentist on this day? Did you have these procedures done? You know, how long was your visit and things like that, just to make everybody on the up and up, because this is an area that, you know, is heavily scrutinized, but also very, very susceptible to little inconspicuous things that, you know, in the overall scheme of things, add up to some significant dollars when you take what they're doing and multiply it by all of the people that they're treating. So hope nobody out there has a family member who's a dentist. But you know, we have used them as sort of our scapegoat for some of the challenges that we've had going forward in terms of these increases that they're suggesting and things along that line. So, you know, it's a challenge that we're up for. We're going to be able to monitor this, and when we do this meeting next year, you know, the current period, you know, every one of those negatives on there, we're suggesting is probably going to be single-digit increases. So, you know, to go from minus 16% this year, we're probably looking at the increase of about 21% over next year. So we're not going to have that 16 reduction that we had, and we're probably going to see a higher incidence level of about 5% just because of the fee guide alone. So, you know, those are the types of things that aren't well publicized in the papers. You don't hear about this. It's sort of behind the scenes, but this is the world that I work in, and it's been a challenge to try and manage this. And, you know, the fact that we weren't able to use the services, yeah, saved us money, but in the long term, are we going to end up paying more for it? I think in the long term, we probably are. And it's little things like this that are going to help to drive the cost up. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Through the Warren, Kathy. Through Kathy, John, I find this very disturbing, because this is going to affect the most vulnerable of our society. You know, they're the ones that hardly can afford to go to the dentist. They don't have benefits, and yet the cost of going is going to go through the roof, not just for benefit plans, but for a regular person going to the dentist. And I just find this very disturbing, because it's always, the effect is always on the most vulnerable. And a lot of those people are not working right now. And so their health is going to decrease because they can't get the dental care that they need. And I just find this very problematic, not just because it's happening to our plan, but the rollout and the effect that it will have on the citizens that we represent. I think this is just quite disturbing.
I have a little bit of a silver lining for you. And if this meeting was yesterday, I wouldn't be able to say this, but I heard this morning on the CBC that they're opening a dental clinic in London. It's the only one in Ontario, and it's modeled after a Quebec-based operation. And it's really for people that are on social assistance, people that don't have dental plans. And it's basically a very, very small user fee. And there's enough people that are on some sort of government disability pensions and whatnot that do have a very, very modest dental component there, that they feel by treating those people and with some donations and fundraising that they do, that they'll be able to sustain this. So there's a bit of a safety net, but I got to say, you know, I don't know if it can accommodate all of the people out there that are impacted by this, because the unfortunate part is the average person walking in, if they don't have a dental plan, probably isn't going to be charged on the current dental fee guide. You know, they'll offer some discounts. There's no shortage of dentists out there, but the ones that are, you know, in practice, you know, are saying, well, we lost money. We had to put in all of these increased safety procedures. You know, we had to plexiglass, we had to change disinfectants, all of those types of things. Also, there's some procedures that they're not able to do. They're not able to do polishings and things like that because the airborne nature of you know, the drill spinning around and everything. So yeah, that's one of the challenges that we see, is that you know, not only did they miss out and cried poor a little bit, but you know, they're gonna play catch up, like a 4.6% increase. And you know, it's not like you have any kind of way of challenging it. You know, we talked to the Ontario Dental Association and asked them, and they, you know, they say, oh, that's their prerogative to charge what they want. To make things even worse, some of the dentists in the major metropolitan areas don't even go by the fee schedule. We've had instances on this group where someone said, you know, I thought I had 100% coverage and I got a bill for $200 but the plan only paid 180. Well, the dentist charged over and above the fee guide. There's nothing stopping them from doing that, but it puts the member even on the program in a bit of a precarious situation, because they're not in a position to question why the dentist is charging more. Or you can say, well, I was referred by a specialist and I have a different schedule that I work under. So this is an area that has run very well. I mean, the dental plan, in the big picture, is in good shape. We flipped it over to basically a self-insured funding arrangement a few years ago. So it's got a healthy surplus there that we can use to ward off, some of these increases that we're seeing. And, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, some of the things that are going on out there, yeah, really do impact the people that can least afford to utilize these types of services. It's funny because you see all the social unrest out there, but you never see people marching down Dundas Street to try and curtail the dental increases or fight against the dentists. So that's a real high level version of what's gone on. I mean, I think if there was some big rate increases, or there were some things we had to justify, but this program has been in place for a long time. You've got a mature group on there. So obviously, as they mature, there's a higher potential incidence level on the medication side of things as the group ages. But there's also an influx of newer and younger people coming on, which help keep the cost down. And any of these types of plans, it's going to be a small number of people. Usually single digits that are the ones that are the cost drivers. It's the old 80-20 rule. So, the majority of those large claims that we showed you came from probably 3 or 4 people overall. And the disability claims on this group are pretty isolated. There's always been a couple at the lodge, but you're sort of at the discrepancy of the overall block of business that the carrier has. And like I said, all of the insurance carriers, whether it's Canada Life or Manulife or Sun, any of them, put through some pretty substantial disability increases over the last year. But the one thing that we saw that was pretty good, some of the stop loss charges that were embedded in the plan to ward off against these high claims have been fairly stable over the last few years. So, anybody we say that basically got a no change or a decrease is about 10% ahead of where inflation is on healthcare these days. So.
Well, thank you very much for that, John. I know that Councillor Vanderheyden asked some questions during your presentation, but were there any other comments or questions from council at this time? I don't see any raised hands. I would agree with you. I think this was a good year for you to come and present the highlights, and certainly we appreciate it, your presence here today. So thank you very much for that.
Always a pleasure. If there's anything if you're thinking I've missed, by all means, let Jessica know, and I'm happy to get back to you. But anyways, enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe, everyone.
Yep. Thanks so much,
Okay.
John.
Take
Stay
care.
safe. Yep. Okay. Any inquiries or notices of motion?
Did we miss the, oh, never mind.
Okay. No inquiries. Oh, Councillor Elliott.
Yes, through your worship, just an inquiry. On February 18th, 2020, Dr. Chris Mackey had come to council and provided a presentation via delegation to county council. And during this presentation, he shared some staggering statistics about the health of Middlesex County, which included statistics like 141 deaths of heart disease in 2019 per 100,000 people compared to 81.2 in the city. Rates of deaths related to dementia and Alzheimer's disease, as well as lung cancer, were also significantly higher in the county versus the city as well. And he noted these rates in Middlesex County were higher than the provincial average. It was noted during the meeting that the Middlesex London Health Unit would follow up on this and look at why it's happening and strategies on what we can do to prevent these deaths. Albeit this was just before COVID hit our area, we are now over a year from being presented this information and we have received no follow-up to this. These are not statistics that we can sweep under the rug. I have raised this on several occasions at our Board of Health meetings that although we are in a pandemic, these issues are still important. However, I haven't gotten anywhere. And it was just my intention of raising this again in hopes that perhaps council would support a letter coming from the warden on behalf of council to the health unit and to Dr. Mackey, that hopefully we could have some follow-up to these statistics and how we can improve the health of our residents.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Councillor Elliott. I would agree with you, that certainly we are in a pandemic, and that does change a number of things, but those are health issues that are affecting our residents that we can't sweep, that we can't forget about. And I think all of us would agree that that's been I know in my own community, that is an often heard discussion about how the pandemic is affecting other health concerns, and that we can't forget about those issues. I'm certainly happy to support that and work with staff to get something like that written. I'm looking for comments from any other councillors. Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, Madam Warden. That is an excellent subject that we have to set as a priority. And I know that certainly the COVID has camouflaged the significance of these statistics, but I would be very happy to move that County Council instruct staff to send a letter to the MLHU regarding the statistics on the overall health of the county as compared to urban areas, and ask what direction they're taking to reverse this trend.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mayhew's moved that. I would ask for a seconder. Councillor Elliott, any further discussion, any questions or comments? Then I would call the vote. All opposed to that? And that's carried. So I will look to Bill to work with staff to get something drafted and off to the health unit.
We're on it. Dear Dr. Mackey, I already got it right up on your screen.
Any other inquiries? Notices of motion. Okay, moving on. No reports. New business. Jessica, follow up from our last presentation.
All right, so thank you, Madam Warden. I've prepared this report to provide council with an overview of the benefits program, which John just went through. The outcome for this benefit year for April 2021 to March 2022. This benefit program does cover all full-time employees working at the county with the exception of Middlesex Lead and paramedic service employees. It does include extended health, dental, group, life, and long-term disability. Again, as I noted before, it is an administrative process and the report is just provided for information only. And that's it.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Any questions for Jessica? Oh, Councillor DeVete.
Thank you. Through the warden to Jessica, I was wondering, is the part of the plan, is there a dollar cap on all those services that are sort of like the osteopath and the massage therapist and all those, or are there limits per each category, and then as opposed to having a pooled amount that is available to the person to, like, for example, if you are someone who needs massage therapy, can you use all those dollars on massage therapy, or is there a limit on massage therapy and then other amounts that relate to all the other services? Does that make sense? You know, there's a big list of services in that category.
Thank you through the warden to Councillor DeVete. Yes, and it really truly does depend on the collective agreement bargaining. So we have a variety. So we do have 2 of our unions and plus the non-union management that is a lumped service. So it's a value amount for chiro, physio, massage, and there's a list goes on. And then 3 of our other unions do have a per visit. So it's $25 or $45 per visit for chiro massage. So we're trying to change it, and we've talked to John before about it. We are trying to change it that it is a lump sum for all services as opposed to the per visit.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jessica. That's everything, Warden.
Great, thanks, Councillor DeVete. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I would just ask for a mover and a seconder to accept Jessica's report for information. Councillor DeVete and Councillor Brennan. All opposed? And that's carried. Okay. Moving on to report from myself and Kara, but I'll get Kara to walk us through it. It has to do with Middlesex, our latest Middlesex Economic Resiliency Task Force meeting. We had a meeting last week. The group got together, and really it's a one-year checkup, which I think the timing was perfect given the situation we find ourselves in. But I'll turn it over to you, Kara.
Thank you, Warden. And as you said, I deliver this report both through you, but also with you as co-chair of the committee. So thank you, Chris, for manning the presentation. So next slide, please. So as the warden aptly stated, we reconvened for a special meeting for a one-year checkup. As you know, we slated the commencement of the Economic Resiliency Task Force back in April of 2020 in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we felt it appropriate at this time to reconvene for a special meeting for the following purposes. It was really a one-year county update report for yourselves, a roundtable with all our lower tier and sector representatives on the task force, a meeting to review the action plan that was developed in 2020 to identify any best practices taking place to date, as well as to identify any gaps in the plan, and then of course present those findings and any recommendations to County Council, which we're here to do for you today. Next slide, please, Chris. So as you would expect, this is what we heard from our task force members. First, frustration. Frustration, particularly with regards to vaccination rollouts, conflicting and confusing colored codes, lockdowns and shutdowns. Exhaustion in terms of keeping up with regulations, pivoting and funding applications, and then ultimately fear of losing livelihoods and of being targeted, which we will talk a little bit as this proceeds. Chris, next slide, please. So here's what we wanted to do. We wanted to learn more after having an exhaustive conversation with our task force members, which I will say that every one of them was able to meet us last week and was happy to do so. We decided to develop a 5-minute, 5-question, 5-day survey immediately following the day after, which of course coincided with the new stay-at-home orders. We received over 100 business responses in less than 24 hours. It remained open until late yesterday, and we have received a total of 130. And I'm going to present to you a summary of that first 100. And I've also done a review of the remaining 30, and we will present something to you following in a summation form following today's meeting. Next slide, please, Chris. So I've entitled this slide, "To What Degree Are Businesses Being Affected?" And here's some of the statistics coming out of that first 100. So over 65% of our local businesses are reporting decreased revenue as a result of the last year's pandemic. That being said, 5% of local businesses only are reporting no impact whatsoever. 10% are actually reporting an increased sales situation, and 95% of all local businesses are reporting challenges, and these exist between losses, inability to grow. I think that's an important piece of the 10% with the increased sales. Many are still reporting the inability to be able to take things to the next level given circumstances. Workforce challenges, and then also personal demands. And I think we can all relate to this. So despite the fact of what everyone's trying to put in to saving their businesses, they are certainly encountering a number of personal challenges, the least of which, of course, will be brought out again by the staying home order of schools being closed following the break. Next slide, please. So I thought it would be interesting to pull out some of the information regarding staffing. So here's where businesses are reporting with regards to workforce issues at the current time. So 38% of businesses have had to lay off workers or reduce their hours to survive the previous shutdowns. 30% of business owners report that they have retained or increased their staffing, some taking personal cuts to do so. 25% of our businesses, of course, have no employees, so they have not had that impact, but of course have had the impact of loss of sales to themselves. And here's a really important piece that I wanted to share with you today. Out of all of the businesses that have responded, and I can say that not a single business missed answering a single question on the survey. Nearly 100% of all of our local employers would like to re-employ their workforce if they are given the opportunity. So the problem, of course, with that, and there's a note here, and we heard this in the task force meetings, and we're hearing this in the public, is that many impacted workers have lost faith in government and in employers. And that is not only given the back and forth that we have experienced, but also the fact that employers have been unfortunately given the choice of having to make decisions about who is expendable in the current situation and who is not. And that has, of course, given some employees the sense that their employers are not there to support them, even though that may not be the case. Next slide, please. In terms of most significant impacts, I'm sure you've heard much of this out in the community, and you see the impact of this as well in terms of the grant offerings that have come about throughout the pandemic. But just to re-emphasize this, and we certainly are hearing this in our community, is the most significant impacts are being felt in tourism and hospitality industries, restaurants, of course, who have been caught in the back and forth many times, personal services who really feel like they have made the investment to be as safe as possible, that are trained to be as safe as possible from day one, and yet are certainly feeling the wake of the shutdowns. Main Street retail, of course, female-led businesses across the board, and not just because they are involved in many of the things that I previously mentioned in terms of those sectors, but also because they oftentimes end up being the caregivers at home as well, not only to their children, but also older populations, their older family members. And so they feel the significant impact of this. And then the one that oftentimes is forgotten, I think, in the wake of all of this is those companies that are internationally dependent, that they cannot simply survive on the domestic market. They rely on not only travel in, but travel out of our country and the supply chains to be fully reinstated in order for them to be effective. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of what we're hearing, what our business community needs in terms of what they've reached out to us for. Vaccination clarity, consistency, supply, and access. Clear guidelines that are easy to follow and do not complicate an already complicated and tumultuous situation. Restrictions geared to activities that are known to spread the virus. Tax breaks and easy to access grants and not lending. Access to professional services to keep pivoting businesses. An end to shutdowns and lockdowns. Reduction in bureaucracy, including delays in licensing, access to international markets. Next slide, please. We also asked the question, what have we been doing that as a county that is working? What we're hearing over and over again is that resources in education are greatly appreciated. Shop local campaigns have been effective and there is a desire for them to continue. Simplified grant offerings like those we have been able to engage in through TRRF and TAF recently. Increased communication through our newsletters, through our email, through our social media channels, which we have certainly been doing. A lot of appreciation for the hashtag Middlesex Strong campaign and all it has done to try to amplify the feelings of our community in terms of coming together in their pride, and the local food movement as well. So not only the work that we've done through projects like Fields to Forks, Hands to Table, but also the culinary guide, takeout menus, maps, and the like. Next slide, please, Chris. All in summation, here are the recommendations that have been brought forward from the task force as well as the members of our community. They're asking for us to advocate for immediate vaccination reform, consistent with the best practices of other health units, mobile and multiple sites, supply, open access for phase 2 groups who wish and need to be vaccinated. And I want to thank our warden and all of our members of staff and all of our members of council for all of your work in this regard. I know that it's not an easy task. I know that there are a lot of obstacles to overcome. The announcement on Sunday regarding the availability of vaccinations throughout the county is certainly welcome news. All of the work that's been done with the Mount Bridges Clinic, I hear over and over again, just exemplary reports on how that it has been rolled out. And I know that's much to thank for members on the screen today. So we thank you for that. Obviously, there are also complications and confusion among our population with respect to who can access, and when it is different than the neighboring communities, it adds to frustration. Also, they've asked for us to advise the province on catastrophic impacts of targeting and imposing restrictions on trade and commerce, particularly on small business and the workforce that is keeping the economy turning, following protocols and not known to be contributing to the spread of the virus. Also, to continue to offer marketing and training supports to Middlesex businesses. And I'm happy to tell you that I've already been able to have some of those follow-up conversations with some of our groups like SWATC actually today to talk about what kind of supports we need to be putting in place with funding they have available for those in tourism and hospitality industries, and we'll continue to have those conversations. They've also asked that we advocate for tax breaks and simplified grants over complicated programs and borrowing. And the interesting perspective on this is not just the complication of having people that do not have necessarily the time and capacity to fill in grant applications or loan applications. It is not only about them not wanting to take on debt at a current time, it's also about the fact, and it was mentioned several times, about government ensuring that they have the staffing on the other side to be able to man these programs, that they feel that allowing for tax breaks of the money that they would already be contributing to the economy be more effective than trying to apply for additional financing that takes more manpower on both sides. And finally, to seek support from regional groups such as SCORE, WOWC, and the Ontario Chamber of Commerce to champion these same causes. They're asking for all people to band together to share the information, which I'm more than happy to do, and on your behalf as well, with these other groups to ensure that these messages are getting out. I know that there was a sense at many times throughout the COVID pandemic that there was survey fatigue, but certainly our businesses have come to the forefront to say they want to be heard loud and strong, and they believe in this community. They want to invest in this community. They certainly have the desire to do that and to rehire their workforce, but they are grappling in order to be able to survive through this latest change. So with that, Chris, if you could proceed. I just want to, on behalf of the task force and on behalf of myself and our department, I would like to thank council for their support. I'd like to thank all the members of the task force, and I'd certainly like to thank the members of our business community in terms of coming forward, having their say, and to continue to wake up and try and do what they do every day during a very difficult time. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for that, Kara. Certainly, I think you encapsulated the 2+ hours that we met last week. You know, there were moments that I felt exhausted. But, on the other hand, too, there were also, positives that came out of it. And, I think what we've all said throughout this whole past year is, with every challenge, there's opportunity. And we have seen businesses across the community, across the county, rise to that and seize opportunity and look for different ways to do business. And that's been very exciting. I think where it gets tiresome is every time they find a new way to do business, it seems like another roadblock is put in front of them. I think it was a great morning that was spent. I certainly appreciated reconnecting with that group. Kara, you mentioned about our businesses, how they've always shown a willingness to participate and survey and give you opinion. And I do think that is because of the support that has come from your department. And it is, the little things. And I mean, that hashtag Middlesex Strong, you see it everywhere. And it really has been picked up. And I think that there is a feeling of support from the county and a willingness to, where we can, help them through. So, congratulations to your department for that as well. Any comments or questions? I think I saw Councillor DeViet's hand up.
Thank you, Warden, and thank you, Kara, for that report. I guess we've heard a lot of this as we've gone through, and as you said, Warden, it's really just emotionally draining to hear some of it. But the thing is, it's a really important part of our community to make sure that those businesses can survive. I was wondering about any action that we could take as county council or that the committee could take. I'm thinking, I've been talking, well, it's tax season, and given my past in that sector in public accounting, I've been talking to a number of people who I've worked with over the years about the tax thing. It's just come up in conversations as well. That whole business of tax breaks and how the SERB funds worked and all of that, there are a lot of problems out there in terms of what people are filing and not filing and all that kind of thing. Is there any way we can write a letter even to our MP or MPs here in the area to suggest that this is something that is driven home to the federal government to make sure that, I don't know, there's help or there's some way of helping businesses get through that rebate part and the tax filing part and all, like what help they're qualified for. And that, as you said, even the people who are on the other end to help them with those questions, there isn't enough staff to answer everybody at CRA. You're on the phone forever to get any kind of an answer or help or fill out a form or do anything. I'm just wondering, is it worth our writing a letter as a council, or is it something that the committee would want to undertake? Or do we do it at the local level as municipalities and say, dear MP, we need to make sure that our businesses are getting the help they need to get through this, just even the paperwork side, and the programs need to be developed in such a way that when they access them, they understand what the costs will be and what the benefits will be, and does this have a long-term implication or a short-term, and without getting into all the details of all that. So I think you get my drift here. It's just a question.
Kara, did you want to take that on, Kara?
Sure, through you, Warden, and to Councillor DeViet, there is a recommendation that is on the agenda today. It is not as detailed as what we were just discussing. However, some of those aspects certainly could be detailed in a letter. I think there is merit in doing that at the county level on behalf of the task force and behalf of our business community. We would, of course, also like to champion that cause to be taken up by some of our regional groups as well. But to the point that you made, it's not just impacting the businesses, it's impacting the workers as well. And we told a story at the task force last week. I was just saying that, a worker that I know had expressed to me absolute desperation in that, they work in personal services. They had gone through a few of the COVID restrictions over the last year. They received SERB, and of course, in the wake of doing their tax return, was saddled with a $2,000 repayment. And, for this low-income family with 2 children, that is absolutely devastating to them. And they are, an immigrant family and really did not know how they were going to get by, if they were going to be able to make payments, really felt that they would be in trouble, not just financially, but criminally, for the payback of this. And it's devastating to hear these kind of stories from people, but this is the reality of what everybody's going through, because a lot of these programs have created a snowball effect for everyone in terms of not really understanding. And, people that might have been able to do their taxes on their own before, they're struggling to know what they should be reporting and where. And I anticipate a lot of mistakes are going to be made, and a lot of repayments are going to be created. So it's definitely.
We were talking about it at the Women's Caucus meeting this morning, and I think we all said this wouldn't be the year to teach yourself how to do taxes if you received any sort of federal government help. So
Right.
So Ina, did you have something you were going to add there?
Oh, so it was just one of those offhand remarks about and penalty and interest and penalties.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that response then, Kara. It's everything.
Great, thank you. Councillor Vanderheyden.
I really appreciate this report, and I was really happy to see that, how many people responded so quickly and answered your questions on the survey, because I think it's important for us to understand the actual breakdown of this. And this, I've had more emails and calls from residents and from businesses over the last week than I've had over the last 2 months, because they're at their last straw. People are at their last straw. I understand. I wouldn't want to be the premier or the prime minister to save your life right now, because that job right now, balancing the well-being of people and the capacity in hospitals, which we all understand, we get it. We don't question that, but the fallout. And you've built your business, you've worked for years and years to build it, and suddenly a stupid pandemic comes that none of us have control over, and the clarity of communication, where even everyone is trying to keep it clear, but it changes. I mean, just the education piece. One day they're saying no, the schools are going to stay open, and the very next day they're not. They have information that we don't have, and it's really I feel bad that this is all happening. But I think this is the kind of thing that gives us some concrete evidence of what's going on in our businesses and in our downtowns and with our residents. And it gives us concrete things that we can do. And you've got them listed right there under recommendations to advocate for and how we can do that. So I'm not adverse to writing a letter on behalf of council to our MPs with this information, saying, this is what's going on the floor. This is the boots on the ground. And how can we help you? How can you help us to help our businesses? Because we're going to lose businesses left, right, and center if this continues. We thought it would last a half a year to a year. We're well into the second year, and we're not seeing a pivot point at this particular point. And I believe we are getting close because of all the vaccines that are happening, and that's what I'm relying my faith on at this particular point. So I guess it's a long way of saying, like, I'm not adverse to sending some kind of a letter to our MPs to say, this is what we're finding. And all the programs that they've put in place, the CERB and the business help, that's been a godsend for the last year. But we still have to continue on that drive because we're not done yet.
I agree, Councillor Vanderheyden. Certainly, Kara mentioned the recommendation in front of you, and we can work on what that sort of correspondence looks like, because I think coming out of that recommendation, there's lots of avenues that we can go down on. We can go down, and contact SCORE, contact WOWC, but on our own, I think that something can come out with this report. Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I love this report, Kara. I like the simplicity of it. It was a nuts and bolts report. It impressed me, and I would very much like to move this recommendation that we advocate for immediate vaccination reform, just as you've mentioned, and in the conclusion that we seek support from the regional groups as well. I'd be delighted to move that motion.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Mayhew. I'd ask for a seconder, and then we can keep the conversation going. seconder for that recommendation? And I assume Councillor Mayhew, it's as it's written and presented, right? As Kara's, that full recommendation that's presented with the report?
That is correct, ma'am. Just as Madam Warden, just as it's written.
Okay. So could I get a seconder for that? Councillor Warwick. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I don't see any other hands, so all opposed. And that's carried. And as I said, Kara and I will work towards a communication plan on that. So.
Yes, and through your warden, just to reiterate, we will be compiling, actually staff is working on it currently to summarize the final 30. And we will come back and provide to all of those groups and to council a very summarized, similar to this, presentation of all of the data put together. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick.
Just as an addition, through you, your warden, just as information, as far as SCORE is concerned, we've been working very hard on the migrant farm worker piece because the different counties that are affected, like Norfolk and Brant, are really seeing the effects of this. And that's something that, you know, when you're looking for a champion to cause, SCORE would be a good one to go with because we are really heavily looking at the agricultural effects of COVID right now.
Okay, thank you for that. Noted. Okay, moving on to councillors' comments. Councillor Vanderheyden.
Thank you. Through the warden, just want to remind everyone that there's going to be another webinar tomorrow night to deal with mental health, and the Women's Caucus is putting that on. So if there's anyone that you know that we haven't invited or that hasn't seen the invitation, please share that, because I think it will be a great event where the leader of the Allison from Women's Rural Resources is going to be speaking at the OPP and Strathmore Caredoc Police on mental health and the different programs that are out there. And we've heard it a couple times now, mental health through reports, that this is something that we need to focus on. So we're really excited to get this off the ground. So thank you to that. I think that was the only thing that I was going to bring up.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Any other councillor comments? Okay, I don't see any hands. Bylaws, Kathy. Do you want a glass of water for this? This is a long list.
Yeah, I know. We just have a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the Council, the Corporation, and the County of Middlesex for April 13th, 2021.
Hey, can I get a mover and seconder for the first and second reading, please? Councillor Elliott and Councillor Richards. All opposed? And that's carried. And for the third and final reading, please. Councillor Vanderheyden and Councillor Smith. All opposed? And that's carried. So moving into the Committee of the Whole, we do not have any delegations and no reports from county officers, no action items. So we'll move right into correspondence and information items. General payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $849,332.29. Planning payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $2,871.26. Electronic payments for the month of March 2021, totaling $2,296,909.60. Social service payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $832,225.98. Strathmere Lodge payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $184,011.82. Road payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $1,124,652.21. MLPS payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $1,604,197.37. ITS payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $104,576.64. Economic development payables to April 2nd, 2021, totaling $70,580.54. And a mover and seconder to receive those for information, please. Councillor Cornelius and Councillor Elliott, all opposed, and that's carried. Strathmere Lodge Occupancy and Activity Report from February 2021. Report from Brent. Road closures 2021. Report from Ryan. AMO update entitled Long-Term Care Modernization and Expansion, Asset Management Plan Timelines Extended, and Age-Friendly Community Planning, dated March 18th, 2021. AMO update entitled OPP Detachment Board Composition Process, Personal Support Worker Temporary Pay Extended, and By Name Lists, dated March 22nd, 2021. AMO update entitled Provincial Budget Highlights plus Bill 257 referred to committee, dated March 24th, 2021. Councillor Vanderheyden.
Thank you. When I read this report, of course, we've read some of the budget that came out. Interesting, the high-speed money that came out. So it'll be interesting to watch where that lands and how that gets processed out. So I'm not sure if this is a place where we really need to. I know we've done a lot of work in Middlesex County on where fiber's going, where there's still a need, whether we need to put a plan in place in order to see if there's opportunity down the road, where we can hook into that opportunity. I know SWIFT is working really hard on SWIFT 2.0, but again, we don't know where the province is going to, how they're going to roll this money out. But I want to make sure that we have a plan in place in order to do that, so that our underserviced areas get help as well, and we're looking toward that. Now, there's a lot of different things in the budget that, you know, the paramedicine, the long-term care wait list, and how that's going to work with paramedicine. Interesting how they rolled that out with our paramedics as opposed to any other program. So that to me, all these things are really interesting, and we all have seen that need. The childcare piece that's in there, how that will roll out for us. How they talked about using a mobile unit for mental health and addictions. And I know that we're going to hear a little bit about that tomorrow night, but you know, how that's all moving forward. And I really didn't see anything in there about budgeting for our hospitals and keeping our hospitals moving forward, when that's one of the places that I personally, and I may be wrong, but I feel if we maybe would have kept the funding for hospitals up all those years, we maybe wouldn't have been in quite the capacity issues that we are with the pandemic. Again, my own opinion, not the county's opinion, but when I see where the numbers are going to come forward, some of it is really, really good, and some of it is still needs some work. So it's not really a question, just some of my concerns and the things that I noticed through the budget, and the things that obviously AMO is also highlighting through the budget.
Thanks for that, Councillor Vanderheyden. I don't know, Bill, if you've got anything input into that. Not really. The internet fiber thing is, I guess, maybe something that we should have kind of right here to always be recognized if there's work that we can be doing in the event that something doesn't happen with some of the other projects that are out there, right? Okay, which one am I on? Okay, AMO update entitled Federal Gas Tax and Updated COVID-19 Regulations, dated March 25th, 2021. AMO update entitled OCLIP Final Payment, AMO's Bill 257 submission and amended COVID-19 orders, dated March 29th, 2021. AMO update entitled Provincial COVID-19 Lockdown, Water Taking Changes, and Long-Term Care Medication Safety, dated April 1st, 2021. Letter from MPAC with respect to changes to the Aggregate Resources Act. Applicants for a license or permit must notify landowners within 120 meters and obtain the names and addresses from MPAC. Copy of a presentation from Coco Paving and Dillon Consulting with respect to the 2021 construction of the Highway 401 Westchester Bourne interchange improvements and Highway 401 rehabilitation. Chris, did you have anything that you wanted to comment on that?
Just to highlight to just maybe to the members of the public that are watching this meeting, on page 5 of that report, it gives you a high level estimation of when you're going to see impacts on, if you travel out through Thames Center on the 401, when you'll see some impacts to your, your daily travels. There is a significant amount of work already happening out there, but we're going to see the closures, and especially around near the end of August, a full closure of the 401 for the erection of the, or excuse me, just for the demolition of, and we're certainly going to see a long closure of Westchester Bourne, as well as the interchange ramps around Westchester Bourne. So this is yet another structure that is being replaced, and be prepared after this structure. Dorchester Road is next, and then we'll see Putnam Road, although they're still early on in preliminary stages of that project. We will see that happen later after Dorchester Road, and still up in the air about Elgin Road, but certainly a pretty significant impact on Thames Center. We'll be watching closely. Detour routes are likely to impact both Thames Center roads and County of Middlesex roads. We're very pleased that the MTO has worked diligently to reduce the amount of time that the 401 itself is closed. But we do continue to emphasize with them the expedience of getting those county roads, in this case Westchester Bourne, back open and operational and running because of the impact there. It's to the truck stop, the Husky truck stop, which is right there. And then in Dorchester Road, when we get further down, there's other businesses there that will be impacted by these types of lengthy construction projects. And just by their nature, they're lengthy. It's a lot of work. So I'll just leave it at that. Just thought that was important for the public to understand. There's going to be some significant impacts over the summer and the coming months.
Great. Thank you for that update, Chris. Councillor Warwick.
Yes, through the warden, and thank you, Chris, for that update. And we did have that on our own Thames Center Council meeting yesterday as well. And as much as it's an inconvenience to our residents, when you actually look at those overpasses, it's thoroughly understood why those overpasses are being replaced as quickly and as fast as they are. In fact, I spend a lot of my time looking up at them as I drive underneath them, wondering when will be the day. So it is good to see it done. And we know it's an inconvenience, but it is necessary.
It's not a good thing to be thinking as you're going over or under overpass. Okay. Next one. Any other comments on that? Okay, 2021 annual repayment limit. This is a report from Cindy. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but Cindy, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Through the warden, I guess I'll just say that this report includes the 2021 annual repayment limit. Municipalities are responsible not to exceed their annual repayment limit. So I'm happy to say that the county has only utilized 4.1% of our limit. So we are well within our limit.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Vander Hayden.
On this one, and I've asked this before a couple of years ago, I was just wondering, because our debt is pretty much the Strathmere Lodge and the rebuild on that. And I know who we got the money from, and there's a penalty clause if we pay it out. At what point do we get to the payment part where the penalty negates us actually going out and doing it with the interest that we'll be paying every year?
Through the warden, that's a very good question. I definitely can come back and answer that. I can tell you though that the loan is done on January of 2026. So we have 5 years to go. So we are getting closer, that's for sure. But I definitely can look into that, and I'll get back to you at the next meeting, Councillor.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, moving on to the Middlesex London Board of Health update for March 2021. Letter from the Minister of Finance providing an update on the Ontario Cannabis Legalization Implementation Fund. Newsletter from the Middlesex Centre Archives dated April 2021. Second report of the Middlesex County Library Board meeting held on March 23rd, 2021. Copy of the March 2021 FCM report to Council. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. And through you, the warden, I had forwarded this to Kathy to put on our agenda. It's just a highlight of our board meetings and committee meetings when we met back in March. And I know I thought I had a busy 4 days, but I know Councillor Vander Hayden's was even busier than mine. But I just want to highlight and emphasize the rural lens that FCM has been taking when advocating for communities across the country. And one of the asks in our federal budget recommendations was a rural lens on our national recovery, specifically in removing the project size thresholds for funding, as well as the growing need for rural and remote streams for homelessness strategies, as well as transportation. And we're starting to see this advocacy come to fruition as during the Municipal Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, which I vice chair, we discussed the most recent announcement for rural streams of $250 million over the next 5 years in rural transit funding. And just to add that Councillor Vander Hayden and I will both be on a roundtable through FCM's Rural Forum on Thursday this week with Minister Maria Monsef to further discuss the needs of rural communities when it comes to transit. And I'm also very happy to report that during the meeting of the Ontario caucus, we unanimously supported Councillor Vander Hayden's nomination to run for president of FCM. And so hopefully by that time, COVID restrictions are lifted and we will be able to celebrate that.
Yes, thanks for that, Councillor Elliott. Certainly, I think it's exciting for our council to have two incredibly strong voices advocating, for the needs of our community on a national level. And I will certainly agree with you. Hopefully, we can get together during the time of the FCM conference to celebrate this incredible milestone and feat that Councillor Vander Hayden's about to take on. So she knows that she's got the support of everyone around this horseshoe. AMO update entitled Province Declares a Third State of Emergency and Issues a Province-Wide Stay-at-Home Order dated April 7th, 2021. And a mover and seconder, please, for these items C10 to C26 to be received for information. Councillor Mayhew and Councillor Elliott. All opposed? And that's carried. Inquiries. New business, our next council meeting will be Tuesday, April 27th. Any announcements? Then I would look for a motion to adjourn, a mover and seconder at 2:49 p.m. Please, Councillor Vander Hayden and Councillor Elliott. All opposed? That's